Well, France reeling from the terror attacks and bolstering security forces there today, as authorities say they expect even more to come. This, as other experts warn, we are likely to see more of what they call, quote, small, unsophisticated terrorist attacks, similar to the savage assault on the Charlie Hebdo headquarters on Wednesday. That in contrast to massive operations like 9/11. So, how do we better defend ourselves from those gun-wielding Islamic terrorists? Captain Bob Wells is a retired member of the U.S. Navy, former National Security Advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney. Bob, you know, it's a war. It's a war of radical Islamic terrorism against us, against the West and our values. And the first shot was fired on November 5th, 1990. That's when Rabbi Meir Kahane was gunned down, assassinated there, here in New York City in a hotel on Lexington Avenue. This photo shot by my dear friend Shannon Taylor, who was there, who's warned. He predicted that there'd be terror attacks like this to come, and there were. 25 years later, after that first assault, the gunman was El Sayed Nosair. He was part of the Rahman, you know, the blind sheikh's terrorist cell. We didn't know about it back then. It took the FBI. They didn't even go in and translate the gunman's materials that was full of jihadi material. Have we learned, and how do we turn this trend around, especially after what has happened this week in France?
Well, thank you, Eric. I think you've provided a great context. There are lessons from the past, and it started, as you mentioned, in 1990. Also recall Lawrence Wright's great book, The Looming Tower, and that foretold the advent of 9/11. I think the United States needs to really be vigilant, as with every terrorist attack, particularly this tragedy in Paris. We'll glean the lessons learned. I think we need to become a harder target, and I think one of the biggest lessons learned so far that I've seen in France is looking at the actual capacity they have with regard to the growing number of homegrown terrorists that have gone to Syria and Iraq and are coming back to France. That's a concern, and that capability needs to be looked at in the United States. Do we have enough? Do we have things planned? What's our strategy for building harder targets in the United States? How much more do our local leaders need? Those are important questions to ask right now.
You know, you just hit it on the head. They got maybe estimates say 2,000 French have gone off to Syria and Iraq, and they could come back. About 100 Americans, they believe, are fighting with ISIS. What's to stop them from, like, sneaking through the border of Syria, you know, going into Turkey, getting on an airplane in Ankara, and just flying, you know, to London and coming in and saying, hey, I was on I went to take pictures of the landmarks and had a nice vacation. When actually, like these guys, these two brothers, apparently they laid low for a whole number of years, so much so that the French surveillance was dropped because they apparently weren't doing anything bad.
We need to deny and to disrupt their travel plans. They can get into those particular countries, but one of the key things that we've learned since 9/11, and we've actually been very successful with, so we've got structure, we've got organizations now in place, we've got collaborative networks in place to work to prevent people from transiting on air transport, sea transport, train transport between different countries and the United States. We just have to be exceedingly vigilant. Our counterterrorism center here, which was established after 9/11, the lessons learned of the 9/11 report, that needs to be reviewed again as well. It's again a new day looking at the French experience here. They're looking at do they have the right capabilities in place here with this growing capacity. I think the capability and capacity discussion needs to be had.
Well, you know what's so frightening about all this is 9/11 was that massive operation, as we said, but of course you got these are just not lone wolves. But let's say a guy gets in a car. This is happening in Israel, and it's also happened in France, happened in Dijon and other places. Some guy in a car and just rams people on the sidewalk and tries to kill them. The gunman in Canada, Parliament. The guy in the cafe in Australia, El Sayed Nosair. The gunman in the Kahane assassination. You know who he was? He was the air conditioning repairman at the New York Criminal Court building. The lawyers knew him. The judges knew him. This guy was part of our society. I mean, look, one of the brothers, the Karachi brothers, met President Sarkozy. He was in a training program. So if they're part of our society, and here, whether here in the U.S. or in France, one guy can, I mean, how do you stop that?
It's part of their character development. Their day jobs are very apparent. We can see them every day in society. They saw them every day in society in Paris, as you just mentioned there. But looking at what the impact of technology is, in particular in the Internet, I'm concerned, quite frankly, that it's going to get worse before it gets better. Most of these societies that are now getting connected with the Internet will now have what they call in political science relative deprivation. They'll be deprived. They'll be jealous. They'll feel like they need to revenge because they can't achieve the economic benefits of their particular society, or they may not be able to succeed. So they're going to embrace an ideology like radical Islam that will take it out on people that have power. And that's going to be the fundamental, I think, going forward, is that as more of these societies become connected in different nation states, like in the northern part of Africa, the Maghreb, looking at what's happening in Africa right now, sub-Saharan Africa, with Boko Haram, these societies will continue to become radicalized when the men in particular don't have economic opportunity, and they see that they are disenfranchised because the internet tells them that they're disenfranchised because of their social media, their night job.
Well, 25 years ago when Kahana was shot, it was an anomaly. Now this terror is spreading. Captain Bob Wells, who says it will get worse before it gets better. Captain Wells, good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.
Marthel?